I'm Rifki Berger from Fun and Function. In this part of our video series, we'll talk about classroom sensory activities and sensory tools. We'll explore how to create a classroom where all students are ready and able to learn. In this way, we'll be able to see how students benefit from appropriate use of sensory activities, tools, and spaces. We'll see how to incorporate sensory activities throughout the school day to keep all students alert and engaged, and how to support an individual student who has a sensory diet recommended by their OT. As we've learned in previous video lessons, every person has unique sensory needs. That means when we put our students together in a classroom, we have a large variety of sensory needs to meet. Our students with a small cup may be anxious or on high alert because the nervous system is responding with flight, fight, or freeze to every stimulus, while others with a big cup barely notice the input. These kids need to move and get extra sensory input to wake up their sleepy nervous system and be ready to learn. Other students are doing just fine and ready and eager to learn. As teachers, staff, and administrators, we want to ensure that our classroom environment considers diverse and changing sensory needs. Sometimes kids come into the classroom upset, frustrated, and in a general bad mood. It's not a recipe for a great day, and it has nothing to do with you. Mom may be away on a business trip. They may have gotten a tuna sandwich for lunch, or the bus ride might have been just too bumpy. I used to drive my sensory son to school every day just to avoid the nausea of a 30-minute ride around the neighborhood. It took me 5 minutes. Here is a sample of times of day that might prove to be challenging. It might be as soon as your students enter the classroom and can't settle down, or after the first bell. They may have trouble getting seated and organized after transitions to and from the lunchroom. Some classes have trouble transitioning from one activity to the other in the classroom. Chaos might ensue when some kids are done with their worksheets and waiting for others to finish. Some kids find it hard to settle down after coming from the bathroom. Circle time or packing up to go home are other times that could be a problem. And sometimes free play becomes a free-for-all. In the classroom, it's important to provide movement breaks, even if you can't get outside or to the sensory room. Simple classroom activities such as yoga, jumping jacks, and deep breathing can provide a much-needed reset and promote a ready-for-learning state. Our classrooms should offer tools for self-regulation, and we must be good detectives to guide our students as to which tools to use if they become dysregulated and unable to learn. These challenging times are good times to try a deep pressure exercise with the whole class. Deep pressure is very calming and organizing, so it's great as part of a daily sensory diet for all students. It gives input to our muscles and joints, our proprioceptive system. Animal walks also provide deep pressure in a playful way. How about pushing the walls of the classroom to make it bigger? One of my favorite activities to do in a classroom is to create an obstacle course. An obstacle course can incorporate so many different body positions and sensations for our sensory seeker and still feel safe for our sensory avoiders. An obstacle course is also a good way to manage a number of children in the room at the same time because they're all walking through the obstacle course at a different point. For our classes, we want to think strategically about when to use sensory breaks. Are we going to time those breaks to come out as we transition from math to science? On a day that we have a history test, do we add in an extra sensory break just before the test? Will we schedule a calming activity right after a school-wide assembly? Even though only some of your students might be showing that they're dysregulated, these sensory activities will benefit all your students. We need to support the class as a whole to have organized and appropriate behavior during these times so that each child will be at their best throughout the school day. Sometimes when disruptive behavior dominates our classroom, it's important to look out for the other students too. Consider our sensory under-responders. On the opposite side of the spectrum, you might find several students slumped over and falling asleep when you discuss American history. Before you start teaching, get the kids moving. Take out beanbags and do beanbag activities, or pull out the coordination scarves. Intersperse your lessons with scoot activities to replace worksheets so that your kids get movement breaks, and toss beanbags to the kids you're calling on. Incorporate flexible seatings like inflatable disc cushions into your classroom. This will wake up your students as they use their core muscles to balance. That helps them stay awake and alert. A ball chair or wobble stool can also be used to keep students engaged, wiggling and jiggling while they stay in their seats. Integrate exercises into math by doing arm circles while counting by 2, 5s, or halves. Studies have shown that movement is the answer to many of our behavioral and academic challenges. At Fun and Function, one of our mantras is, active minds need active bodies. It's the cornerstone of our Active Mind collaboration with schools. Again, what you will use depends on your students' needs. It also depends on your classroom management style. A combination of alerting and calming activities will make your classroom an environment where kids are ready to learn. The point is that we're empowered. When we notice that our students are dysregulated, we can just be resigned to being one of those days, or we can be proactive and give them the calming tools they need.
Dear teacher, I know it doesn't always seem like it, but I really do want to listen and learn.
It's just my brain is kind of different. So this is what I'd like you to know about me.
I have to move, or I really can't pay attention.
Even though I'm not looking at you, I can still listen to what you're saying.
If you tell me, sit up straight, now I have to use all of my brain to do just that.
It makes me feel sad when you tell me to try harder, even though I've already tried as hard as I can.
I actually listen better when I'm rocking in my chair.
When you give me a bunch of directions, I start to think, I will never remember all of this.
Sometimes my mom or dad ends up doing all of my homework. So here's how you could maybe help.
Let me get up and move while I'm learning.
Let me look wherever I want when you talk to me.
Let me rock or slouch in my chair.
No matter what, please don't take away my recess. Give me help I could do all by myself. Make directions very short.
Just ask me, what does your brain need right now?
And one more thing. My brain might be different than yours, but it's still amazing.
Sincerely, your student.
Your student.
Your student.
Your student.
The boy who sits alone quietly while his friends clamber on the playground, racing up the ladders and zooming down the slides, is he fearful of all that proprioceptive and vestibular input? Is he tired? Is he protecting an overactive tactile system based on the fear of others banging into him on the playground? Does he have a headache? Not all observed behaviors are communicating sensory needs, but when we understand sensory needs, we know to consider the possibility of a sensory need underlying that behavior. As a good sensory detective, we will observe when these behaviors occur and try to tease out whether it's behavioral or sensory. One of the clues will be if this behavior occurs in different situations. What's the common thread connecting these situations? If you realize that all the situations involve loud noises or bright lights or strong smells, that might be your clue that we're observing a sensory need. An occupational therapist may provide specific activities designed to meet the complex sensory needs of a particular student. These are things that we do throughout the day to support our sensory system. This is what we call a sensory diet. The OT considers the child's sensory profile and suggests routines and activities that will give the child the sensory input that they need to be calm and focused throughout the day. For example, Freya has oral motor sensory needs and often makes sounds, smacking her lips or humming. The OT might suggest that Freya keep a water bottle at her desk or use a chewy. Either one might calm her need for oral stimulation. Just like a diet tells you what foods to eat and when, a sensory diet tells you which tools to use and when. Sensory breaks are provided to children who need it. These breaks might take place every 45 minutes, every hour, or even every 2 hours, with the goal of extending the time between the breaks. Freya should get a cue to sip her water at designated intervals to prevent her need to get oral stimulation by making sounds. It's important to note that we offer, but we don't impose sensory activities. A good way to implement a sensory diet is by using cards or pictures for self-calming that show 2 to 4 choices and see which one Freya chooses. The goal is to offer sensory activities preemptively on a schedule so that it's part of the child's sensory diet. This way, we're preventing behaviors instead of reacting to them. To effectively carry out a sensory diet, it's important to consult an occupational therapist. The occupational therapist should discuss the sensory diet with us and provide us with training and tools for implementation. It's also important to share our feedback about what we see in the classroom with the OT, so it can be determined whether the sensory diet is helping the child to learn. To learn more about sensory tools and activities, join me in our next video as we talk about sensory corners and break boxes.